Well, thank you very much, and my pleasure to be here, and really appreciate the invitation. What we believe to build out this industry for green finance, for the financial sector, really to be financing the needs of society, it takes learning from each other. And I think it takes doing, learning from what we do, and then expanding. And what we see here in Morocco, it brings me hope in terms of the willingness and the ability to take action, both from the political side, in terms of the leadership from government, but also certainly from the private sector. And since Morocco hosted the Climate COP in 2016, the mobilization around that event and the follow-through since has been quite astounding. UNEP Finance Initiative is a long-standing partnership between the finance industry and the United Nations system. It was launched at the Rio Earth Summit in 1992, so it goes back quite some time. And it was launched because there were a number of banks and insurance companies who attended that summit, which was a negotiation between governments, and they realized that there's something happening in the notion of sustainable development, something where the finance sector actually has to play a role. And that has led to many years of development, and our job is to work with the financial sector across banking and insurance and investment to get them to develop their norms for what is responsible and sustainable business practice across the financial industry. If I can talk a little bit about historically, I think the biggest developments have been in 2006, when the Principles for Responsible Investment were launched by Kofi Annan in New York. And today, 80% of global institutional investors are signed on to those principles, and that provides a framework for what it means to be a responsible investor. 6 years later, we work with the global insurance industry to launch Principles Sustainable Insurance to set up a similar framework for insurance underwriting. And the big development today is the banks. And the banks are now stepping up. They're in the process of drafting a set of global Principles for Responsible Banking. This is drafted by a group of 28 banks, including the largest bank in the world, ICBC, and many others. And since they've launched their draft, 40 additional banks have joined on, including BMC from Morocco and 13 other banks from across Africa. So 13 out of 68 is a very strong participation for African institutions. And the structure of these principles is a little bit different because they're being drafted in what we call the post-2015 world, so after the SDGs have been launched and the Paris Climate Agreement. And therefore it takes in new notions. One is that this is not only about risk, but it's also about opportunity and impact, and understanding the impact that you as a financial institution have on the needs of society. It's also about setting targets, business targets, to say where do we want to move forward our portfolio on certain key issues, whether those issues are in the area of climate action, whether it's in biodiversity loss, whether it's on social issues or access to finance. So this new banking framework provides a structure to establish the norms of what it means to be a responsible bank, and essentially the tools to start to set the business systems in motion that you need to actually start to deliver. I mean, I think the big challenges are this is no longer a niche activity. And since 2015, there's been a huge amount of innovation in the financial markets, in green financial products and services, which has been fantastic. Most active market leaders have been doing something, which is super. However, we need to move from something to everything. So essentially, the big challenges are how do we do real deep integration of sustainability considerations into financial practice, which means, if I can give a very simple example, if you're going to do a green bond for, let's say, for a renewable energy project, which is a fantastic purpose for such financing, you probably, within a bank, whatever role you play, you only need a couple of people to actually know what is a green project. Because infrastructure, it's fairly concentrated in terms of the teams required. But if you're going to start to work with green mortgages, so financing for homes and green and efficient homes, you need a much larger part of your organization to really understand what is green and to start to document and track the green content within your transactions. And if we go through the whole organization from providing the mortgage to packaging the mortgages to selling them off into the capital markets as green bonds, you need deep integration. And so I think the big challenge today is how do we move from a side part of our business where we're just trying out something to actually making this part of everyday business. And that requires a significant upskilling in terms of our staff. It requires changing incentive frameworks so that people are mobilized to actually deliver, to develop new products, but to actually mainstream across their business. And it requires obviously enabling policy frameworks. So a lot of work needs to be done from the public sector, but also between the public and private sector working together. It really comes down to learning from each other and motivating and mobilizing. And so it's about first seeing that there's opportunity, and then it's showing. And this can be showing across market actors, across the banks, the investors, the insurers, regulators, financial centers, the stock exchanges. Everybody's starting to become aware of the opportunities in this space. Everybody's starting to do something, but very few can really say that they're holistically, through and through, only about green finance. And so when we talk about, you really need to move the focus from green transactions to green institutions to understand what that means. And in terms of what can be done on the African continent, I think it's the ability to bring together the actors like we are doing here today in Casablanca, to learn from each other, to motivate each other, and then figure out how can we work together to deliver at scale across organizations and in a way that our economies and our societies require.